the forbidden life. The city of Ardentis glittered under the neon lights, but for Alara, the beauty of the futuristic towers meant little. She sat in her small apartment staring out at the bustling streets below. People moved quickly, carrying holographic devices, chatting through digital screens, or walking with robotic companions. Everyone seemed perfect, strong, and free. Alara, however, was not free. Her legs were paralyzed from the waist down, a result of an accident years ago. Despite the advanced technology surrounding her, she still relied on a wheelchair. And in a society that valued strength and perfection, she had learned to hide herself, to stay quiet, and to expect rejection. She had tried before: job interviews, social gatherings, even introductions to potential partners. Every time the outcome was the same. She is brilliant, but she cannot have a family, they said. She is limited. Each word felt like a sharp blade, cutting deeper than the last. Alara worked in a research lab, creating technology to help others. Her mind was quick, her ideas revolutionary, yet she was always reminded that her body did not match her brilliance. Her inventions were praised, but she was rarely allowed to lead teams or take the final decisions. It was as if the world admired her brain but rejected her entirely. One rainy evening, as Alara adjusted a holographic interface, the lab door opened. A man entered, shaking off the rain from his coat. He carried a small child by the hand, a boy no older than 7, who peeked curiously at the equipment around him. The man's eyes landed on Alara. He didn't look away, and there was no pity in his gaze. Only recognition. "I'm Dr. Kieran Vale," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm overseeing the new project. I've heard about your work." Alara straightened, slightly surprised. Most people dismissed her before giving her a chance. But Kieran's eyes, they didn't. There was respect there, and perhaps even something more. I'm Alara," she replied quietly, unsure if she should introduce herself. The boy tugged at Kieran's coat. "Daddy, she's amazing." Kieran smiled faintly, then turned back to her. "I believe in skill, Alara, not in appearances. Let's see what you can do." Alara's heart pounded. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever seen her for what she truly was: intelligent, capable, and strong in ways that mattered. Over the next few days, Kieran observed her closely. He asked questions about her research, challenged her ideas, and sometimes just watched as she worked. She noticed that he never treated her like she was fragile. He never suggested she needed help unless she asked. And slowly she began to trust him. Not fully, but enough to hope. One evening after the lab had emptied, Alara stayed behind, adjusting a complex device that could repair damaged neural pathways. Kieran approached quietly, holding a cup of tea. "You know," he said softly, "most people would never give this project a chance. They would have dismissed you immediately. But I don't see limits. I see potential, and talent, and courage." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. She had spent so long believing she was invisible, unworthy, and denied the life she wanted. But here was someone who saw her, truly saw her. The rain outside fell harder, tapping against the lab's windows, but inside something changed. For the first time in years, Alara felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, her life could be different. And as she looked at Kieran, a single father who had entered her life unexpectedly, she realized that her story was about to change. Someone had seen her worth, not despite her paralysis, but because of the strength she carried in her mind and heart. For the first time, the forbidden life she had accepted for so long seemed possible. The unexpected connection, the lab was quiet except for the soft hum of machinery. Alara's fingers hovered over the holographic interface, adjusting circuits in a neural repair device she had been working on for weeks. She was used to silence. It was the only time she felt truly in control. A shadow fell across her workstation. She looked up and saw Kieran standing there, his coat still damp from the rain. He held the boy's small hand, but the child was asleep, leaning against him. "You're still here?" Kieran said softly, his voice gentle. "Most would have left hours ago." Alara shrugged, pretending not to care. "Some of us don't leave until the work is done," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. Kieran studied her carefully. There was something in the way she moved, precise and methodical, that made him pause. Most people would have struggled with the complexity of this device, but she handled it effortlessly, He had seen many brilliant minds, but few like hers. "You're extraordinary," he said finally. "I've seen engineers who worked for decades and never created something like this." Alara froze slightly. Compliments were rare and admiration even rarer. Most people overlooked her entirely, but Kieran didn't. His words weren't pity, they were honest, clear, and real. I just do my job," she said quietly, unsure what to make of his attention. Kieran stepped closer, keeping his voice low so the boy wouldn't wake. "You do more than that. You inspire. Even without knowing it, you challenge the way people think." Alara looked down at her hands. Inspiration? She had spent years believing she was limited, that society would never accept her, that family and love were dreams meant for others. No one had ever spoken to her this way. Not like this. For the first time, she felt a connection, not just professional but personal, and she realized it was frightening. Over the next few days, Kieran returned often, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He asked questions about her research, offered suggestions, and occasionally helped adjust her devices when she struggled to reach certain controls. Small gestures, but they mattered. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said one evening, placing a tool in her hand. "Even someone like me can help." Alara wanted to resist. She had spent her life learning to manage, to survive, to avoid dependence. But there was something different about him. He didn't see her as broken. He didn't see her disability as a weakness. He only saw her skill, her mind, and her courage. One afternoon, they worked side by side, adjusting the neural device for a test subject. Kieran watched intently as she carefully made adjustments, his eyes never leaving her hands. When a minor malfunction caused sparks to fly, Alara panicked, but Kieran's calm presence steadied her. "It's okay," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You've got this. Trust yourself." Alara took a deep breath and continued. The sparks stopped. The device hummed smoothly. She glanced at him, and for a moment their eyes met. No words were needed. A silent understanding passed between them. Trust, respect, and perhaps something more. That evening, as they left the lab, Kieran held the door open for her. The neon city lights reflected on the wet streets, and she felt a strange warmth she hadn't experienced in years. She realized that for the first time someone truly saw her, not as a disabled woman, not as a challenge, but as a person of value. And in that realization, a small spark of hope ignited in her heart. Perhaps the forbidden life she had accepted for so long could change after all. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. With Kieran, she was no longer alone. The first challenge, the lab was buzzing with anticipation. Today was the day Alara would lead the trial of her latest invention, a neural interface designed to help paralyzed individuals regain partial mobility. For months, she had poured her mind into the project, perfecting every detail. Yet the pressure was intense. Society's expectations weighed heavily, and any failure could reinforce the prejudices she had spent her life fighting. Kieran stood nearby, his young son perched on a stool, quietly watching. "You're ready," he said softly, but with a firmness that made her focus. "Trust yourself. You've done the work." Alara nodded, swallowing the lump of nervousness in her throat. She had worked alone for so long, doubting whether anyone could truly understand her ideas. Now, with Kieran's quiet support, she felt the tiniest spark of confidence. The test subject, a young man with partial paralysis, was brought in on a sleek, wheeled chair. Sensors lined his arms and legs, linking to the neural interface. Alara adjusted the controls, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The room was silent except for the hum of machines and the steady breathing of the participant. Kieran leaned slightly closer. "Remember, one step at a time. Focus on the system, not the outcome." Alara took a deep breath and initiated the interface. Lights flickered across the device and sensors hummed to life. Slowly, the man's fingers twitched, then flexed. A small gasp escaped the participant as he realized movement had returned. But then the interface glitched. Sparks flickered, lights dimmed, and the sensors began sending erratic signals. The participant froze, panic in his eyes. Ilara's stomach dropped. This could ruin everything. "Stay calm," Kieran said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension. "You can fix this." Ilara's hands moved faster, recalibrating the device, tracing circuits in a blur. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Every second counted. She thought of every failure she had ever endured, Every word of doubt society had whispered, and she pushed through the fear. Finally, with a soft click, the system stabilized. The participant slowly lifted his arm fully, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. I can feel it. I can move. The room erupted in cautious applause. Kieran's eyes shone with pride, but he didn't let the moment distract him. Not done yet, he reminded gently but firmly. Observe him carefully. Any mistake could be dangerous. Alara nodded, scanning the data on the monitors. The interface was working perfectly now, responding to neural signals with precision. She felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. For the first time, she realized her abilities could not be denied. Not by society, not by prejudice, not even by fear. After the trial, Kieran approached her. You were amazing, he said, his voice steady and sincere. I've seen many brilliant minds, but your skill, your courage under pressure, that's rare. Alara flushed, unsure how to respond. Praise was foreign to her. Recognition even more so. I just wanted it to work, she murmured. Kieran smiled. And it did. You made it work when no one else could have. That's what matters. Yet as the excitement settled, Alara felt a creeping unease. The room was full of colleagues, some impressed, some envious, and a few skeptical. She could feel the whispers, subtle doubts about her body, her place in society, her right to success. Kieran seemed to sense it too. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Ignore them, he said firmly. They can't see what I see. They can't see you. Alara looked up at him, a small smile forming despite the lingering tension. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not for her paralysis, but for her mind, her courage, and her strength. And in that moment, she realized the first challenge had not only tested her invention, it had tested her spirit. And she had passed, growing trust and admiration. The city lights outside the lab flickered softly through the tall glass walls, casting a warm glow on the equipment inside. Alara sat in her wheelchair, reviewing the data from the successful neural interface trial. Her fingers traced the holographic graphs, but her mind wandered. She couldn't stop thinking about Kieran, his calm voice, his unwavering confidence, the way he had never treated her like she was broken. Kieran leaned against a nearby console, arms crossed, watching her with quiet interest. You did well today, he said finally, breaking the silence. Better than I could have expected. Alara looked up, surprised by his praise. Compliments had always felt heavy, like obligations or pity. But Kieran's words, they were different, genuine, honest. Something in her chest loosened, a warmth she hadn't felt in years spreading slowly. I wanted it to work, she said softly, almost to herself. You wanted it to work, he repeated, but you made it work. That's the difference. Most people give up when the pressure mounts. You didn't. For a moment their eyes met, and Alara felt a strange connection, one she hadn't anticipated. She realized that in this man she saw not just an ally or colleague, but someone who understood her drive, her struggle, and her worth. Over the next week, Kieran returned to the lab frequently, not only to oversee the project but to spend time with her. Sometimes he helped adjust the devices she could not reach. Other times he simply talked, sharing stories about raising his son alone, about the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. At first, Alara was cautious. Trust had always been fragile for her, easily broken by rejection or pity. But Kieran never judged her. He never treated her like she was limited. Instead, he listened, encouraged, and acknowledged her intelligence. One evening, they stayed late in the lab. The hum of machines filled the silence as they worked side by side. Kieran noticed her hands trembling slightly while adjusting a delicate circuit. Without hesitation, he reached over and steadied them. You don't have to do everything alone, he said quietly. Even someone like me can help. Alara felt her chest tighten. His words were simple, but they carried a weight she hadn't realized she needed. She had spent so many years hiding, trying to survive in a world that refused to see her value. And now, someone was standing beside her. Not in pity, but in partnership. That night, as they walked through the lab's corridor toward the exit, Kieran's son waved from the corner, yawning. Alara smiled faintly. She had never interacted much with children, but the boy's presence was comforting. A reminder that life could be more than work and rejection. You have a gift. Alara, Kieran said suddenly, breaking her thoughts. A gift not just for invention, but for courage. People may not see it yet, but I do. And I will. Ilara looked at him, the glow of the lab lights reflecting in her eyes. She didn't know if she could believe him entirely yet, but part of her wanted to. The spark of hope in her chest grew stronger, fueled by the simple truth that someone saw her, not for her paralysis, but for her heart and mind. Outside, the neon city pulsed with life. Inside the lab, a quiet bond was forming, a bond built on trust, admiration, and shared purpose. And although the world beyond the walls remained harsh and judgmental, Ilara felt, perhaps for the first time, that she was not alone. She didn't know what the future held, but one thought echoed in her mind. With Kieran by her side, the impossible might just be possible. And in that thought, a small, thrilling hope bloomed, a hope strong enough to change her life. The threat of separation. The city council's chamber was cold and sterile, its bright lights reflecting off the polished floor. Ilara sat stiffly in her wheelchair, her fingers gripping the armrests as the council members whispered and exchanged disapproving glances. Kieran stood beside her, his young son holding onto his coat. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. "You know why you're here," the council head said, his voice sharp. "A person with a physical disability, no matter how talented, cannot legally assume the role of a family head or a parent. The regulations are clear. Your recent involvement with this man, this single father, violates societal norms." Ilara's stomach churned. She had expected challenges, prejudice, and whispers of doubt, but a formal accusation? A threat to take away the possibility of a family she had never even been allowed to dream of? Her hands shook, but she held her gaze steady. Kieran stepped forward. "Ilara is not defined by her disability," he said firmly. "She is intelligent, capable, and compassionate. She has proven this not only in her work, but in life. Denying her the chance to be part of a family is not justice, it's cruelty," a council member sneered. "And who decides what is just? The law is the law. Your intentions are noble, but the rules exist for a reason. Families must meet certain standards. Physical ability is one of them." Ilara felt a spark of anger flare within her. For years, society had dictated her limits, forced her to accept a life without love or family. And now, even as someone saw her value, the rules tried to push her back into the shadows. "I am more than my legs," she said quietly, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I am capable of love, care, and guidance. I am capable of creating a home, and I will not let your narrow rules define my life." Whispers filled the chamber, some supportive, some skeptical. Kieran's hand rested on her shoulder, a silent reassurance. He had never doubted her. He had stood beside her, even when the world turned against her. The council head's eyes narrowed. "Even if we overlook your words, the law still stands. You risk your reputation, your position, and your relationship. Are you willing to face the consequences?" Ilara's gaze met Kieran's. She saw the concern in his eyes, but also unwavering trust. She drew a deep breath. "I am willing," she said firmly. "I will not step back. I will not hide. If this is a challenge, I will face it." The council deliberated for hours, discussing regulations, societal expectations, and potential consequences. Outside the chamber, citizens whispered and watched, divided between admiration and doubt. As the meeting drew to a close, the council head finally spoke. "We cannot condone this union under current law," he said, his tone final. "However, exceptions may be considered if the individuals demonstrate exceptional ability, responsibility, and integrity. You have 30 days to prove your case." Ilara exhaled, relief and anxiety mingling in her chest. They had not been rejected entirely, but neither had they been fully accepted. The threat of separation still loomed like a storm on the horizon, waiting to test their courage and resolve. Kieran squeezed her hand gently. 30 days, he said. "We'll show them who you really are. We'll show them that love, courage, and strength matter more than rules written on paper." Ilara nodded, a determined spark lighting her eyes. The challenge was greater than anything she had faced before, but for the first time she felt ready. She had someone who believed in her, someone who saw her worth, and with that belief, she knew she could confront the world, even if it tried to deny her happiness. Even if society tried to keep her apart from the life she deserved, the days ahead would test them both. But Ilara's heart was no longer afraid. She would fight for her right to love, to belong, and to finally have a family of her own. Overcoming the impossible. The lab was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. Outside, the city lights glimmered against the night sky, but inside, Ilara felt a storm raging in her chest. 30 days had passed since the council had given their ultimatum. 30 days to prove that she was capable, not just as a brilliant scientist, but as someone worthy of family, trust, and love. Kieran sat beside her, his son asleep in the corner. "We can do this," he said quietly, his hand brushing hers. "You've already done more than they could imagine. Now we just have to show them." Ilara nodded, swallowing the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. The challenge was daunting. A live demonstration of her neural interface, not only restoring mobility to a participant, but ensuring complete safety and reliability under scrutiny. If she failed, the council's decision would be final. The test subject, a young woman with severe paralysis, was wheeled into the lab, her eyes wide with hope and fear. Ilara adjusted the sensors, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Every movement mattered. Every calculation, every connection could determine the outcome. "Are you ready?" Kieran asked softly. Ilara took a deep breath. "Yes, let's begin." The device hummed to life, glowing softly as it linked with the subject's nervous system. At first, nothing happened. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the moment that defined her future? Then slowly the subject's fingers twitched. A gasp filled the room. Ilara's pulse quickened. But she kept her focus, monitoring the data streams, adjusting the interface with precise movements. Suddenly, an error flashed on the console. Sparks flickered and the sensors began sending irregular signals. Panic rose in the test subject's eyes. Ilara froze for a fraction of a second, but Kieran's calm voice anchored her. "You've done this before," he reminded her. "Trust yourself." With renewed determination, Ilara recalibrated the circuits, tracing the neural pathways with practiced skill. Sweat dripped from her forehead, but she didn't falter. The error corrected itself. The interface stabilized. The test subject lifted her arm fully, a wide smile breaking across her face. I can move," she cried, tears in her eyes. Slowly she stood, stepping carefully at first, then with growing confidence. The council members, who had watched silently from behind the observation window, murmured in astonishment. Ilara's chest swelled with relief and pride. She had done it. Not only had she proved the interface worked, but she had shown that she could handle pressure, solve problems, and protect those in her care. Her skill and courage had triumphed over doubt and prejudice. Kieran stepped forward, his eyes shining. "You see? They have no choice now. They can't ignore this. You've shown them your strength, your mind, and your heart. You've overcome the impossible." Ilara turned to him, a smile spreading across her face. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. He shook his head, his hand brushing hers. "No, you did it yourself. I only reminded you that you could." The council convened immediately, reviewing the live data and the successful demonstration. Their faces, once stern and skeptical, softened as they realized what they had witnessed. Talent, courage, and determination could not be denied, no matter societal expectations. Hours later, the council announced their decision. Ilara had proven herself beyond question. She had the right to form a family, to be recognized not by her limitations but by her abilities, her judgment, and her heart. Relief washed over her, but more than that, a quiet joy bloomed. For the first time, the world seemed to acknowledge her worth. Kieran's young son ran forward, hugging her tightly. "You did it!" he exclaimed. Ilara laughed softly, feeling a warmth she had never thought possible. "We did it," she corrected, glancing at Kieran, whose eyes met hers with pride and admiration. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning. Together they had faced the impossible, and now a new life awaited them, full of hope, love, and the promise of a future free from judgment. Ilara realized then that courage, trust, and determination could break barriers, reshape lives, and create a world where anyone, no matter their limitations, could belong. New beginnings. The sun rose slowly over the city of Ardentis, casting golden light across its sleek towers. For Ilara, it felt like the first truly bright morning she had seen in years. The storm of prejudice, doubt, and fear had finally passed, and a new chapter of her life was beginning. Her wheelchair rolled quietly across the lab floor, now free from the tension and scrutiny that had haunted her for so long. Machines hummed softly in the background, but this morning, their sound felt like music rather than pressure. Kieran walked beside her, holding their son's hand, and for the first time, the three of them moved together as a family, not just in name, but in reality. "You did it," Kieran said softly, glancing at her with pride. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who ever felt limited by what others thought." Alara smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "We did it," she corrected gently. "I couldn't have done it without you. Or him." She nodded toward Kieran's son, who was already busy pushing buttons on a holographic display, giggling at the lights and sounds. For a long moment they stood there, the weight of the past fading into the bright promise of the present. Alara thought back to the years she had spent hiding, the moments of rejection, the nights when hope seemed impossible. And now, she realized, all of that pain had led her here, to a life she had never dared to imagine. Outside the lab, society was beginning to change. The demonstration of her work had made waves. People were talking, not just about her abilities, but about courage, equality, and the value of seeing beyond appearances. Her story spread, inspiring others who had been denied opportunities because of prejudice. Alara knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges, skeptics, and obstacles, but she also knew something stronger. The bond she shared with Kieran, the love they had nurtured, and the trust between them was unbreakable. Together they could face anything. Later that afternoon, they moved into a small sunlit apartment overlooking the city. It was modest, but for Alara, it was perfect. The walls were blank now, but soon they would be filled with memories, laughter, and the little joys of family life. Kieran helped her settle in, gently adjusting her wheelchair in the doorway. "Home," he said simply, the word carrying more meaning than any grand speech could. Alara looked around, her heart full. "Home," she repeated, savoring the sound. It was more than just a place, it was belonging. Acceptance and love finally within reach. That evening, as the city lights flickered on and reflected in the windows, Alara sat with Kieran and their son at the small dining table. They shared a simple meal, but it was rich with conversation, laughter, and the quiet happiness of a family united. "I never thought I could have this," Alara admitted, her voice soft. "A family. A life where I'm seen. For me." Kieran reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You deserve it, Alara, more than anyone. Your courage, your heart, your mind. All of it matters. And now the world can see it too." She looked at him and then at their son and realized something profound. The world might still have rules, limits and doubts, but love, determination, and belief in one another could break through all of it. As night fell over Ardentis, the three of them sat together by the window, watching the stars emerge. Alara felt a quiet strength settle in her chest. For the first time, she was not just surviving, she was living. She was loved, she was valued, she was free. And in that freedom, a new beginning had begun, a life filled with hope, courage, and endless possibilities. The storm had passed and the future was theirs to shape together.